He begins with recognizing a problem. The capitalists, the people with a lot of money who run the business of a society in modern life, are a tiny number, which means immediately they have a big problem. They're a tiny number. And the people they oppress and they underpay are a large number. This is a very troubling reality. You must do something. Whether you're understanding it or not really doesn't matter. You have to do something to handle the imbalance. Slave masters figured that out relative to slaves. Feudal lords figured it out relative to serfs, and capitalists have figured it out, says Gramsci, in relationship to the working class. And the basic idea, as he looks at it, he studies Italy particularly, because that's where he's from. And he comes out of an incredibly creative Italian intellectual left wing that he borrowed from and that he honored with his work. His answer was, and here I may disagree a little bit with others, his answer was there is no such thing as false consciousness. There are only different consciousnesses. The working class, to use a modern American language, does not suffer from false consciousness. Should not be asked the question, why do you vote against your own interests? Because the answer Gramsci would immediately insist on is, they don't. What then are they doing? They have been carefully cultivated to have and to feel deeply about other interests. And that's a long, difficult process. How do you get the working class to be not interested so much in what happens at the workplace, not interested so much what happens in the voting booth, but terribly interested in foreign military adventures, terribly interested in rituals of patriotism and nationalism. That takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of time to cultivate. To put it as sharply as I can imagine, suppose a working class, obviously I'm not talking about the United States, but just suppose a working class is screwed on the job, underpaid, overworked, all of that. Its interest in that job situation could be to revolutionize it, to transform it. That's what we want. But someone else might construct the same experience as, that's not the important part of you. That's not really what you're about. Are you screwed as a consumer? Well, that's not really an important part either. You know what's really important about you? Is you're white. Or you're an American. Or you're not an immigrant. These are the important things about you, which are going to be celebrated, are going to be raised up and honored. You have an interest in supporting that honoring and engaging that because it honors you in a society where you as a worker are dishonored all the time. That's why you don't want to stay on that job, do you? And why you go on the way from the job home and stop at that famous place that offers you what you haven't had all day, namely a happy hour. Right? So you don't. You look for something else. But you begin to be having an interest in the patriotism, in the nationalism, in the white business. Your skin color becomes important. Your origin or that of your family. People have an interest. And the struggle becomes, in Gramsci's mind, how do we honor and recognize the interests served by the identifications that have been built into this culture that militate against revolution and change? And how do we build a, to use his language, counter-hegemonic, a way of developing beliefs and feelings that will make people have an interest in changing their conditions, rather than celebrating nationalism. Final thought. I don't know how many of you read the speech by our president after he withdrew the United States from the Paris Accords yesterday. But if you read the speech, and I urge you to do it is an endless repetition of one idea. I, Trump, am saving America from the evil machinations of foreigners, climate lunatics, and others who threaten our American situation. It is a celebration of nationalism, a nationalism that has been the identification for people whose other parts of life have been made horrible by the very forces that celebrate the nationalism. They are teaching people how to think of themselves in such a way that militates against seeing and responding to what we are trying to do. We have to understand that, says Gramsci. We have to deal with undermining the identifications people have with the interests that they are allowed to celebrate around themselves, undermine that, and offer others the romance, because that's partly what it is, of being a fighter for justice. That's a very powerful image. It could become a powerful image for millions of Americans. So could the notion that we welcome immigrants, that to celebrate the solidarity of people. Because after all, the immigrants were driven to come here by the same forces that are the problem. And that maybe the immigrants together with the workers here could become a counter. Those images have worked. They can work again. But it has to be an understood struggle over the culture of a society. To identify which parts of that culture are the problems for social change and which are the opportunities. Gramsci began as a young man as a theater critic for a newspaper in Italy. He tried to understand in his reviews what theater captured people and what didn't. That's the same issue. What theater is capturing people? Mr. Trump is a theater producer, as have all the other presidents been. We have to understand how they make their theater successful and offer an alternative theater that can pull people to a place where the objective situations and the subjective come together to make the change happen. Thank you.